Today we're going to finish up our new site, and remember where we started was just like this disgusting page just full of components, and now we have almost a fully functional, pretty much a fully functional like React, what's called a single page application. Like everything is enclosed in one spot. New Site 6 is supremely more difficult than New Site 1 through 5. So we will go slowly and be sure to ask questions if you have anything along the way. So I've cloned down 5 and 6. And to get started here, we're just going to move the source from New Site 5, and I have Raymond's stuff over here. I'm just going to move it directly into New Site number 6. At this point, I will cd out one level, go into New Site number 6, npm install to install everything, and I'll just wait. Let's see, is there anything else I need to update you on in terms of the calendar? Nope, you'll be here. I will just remind you that the 5th, which is a Thursday, you're going to have career prep here for behavioral skills, and then the following Tuesday you'll have another behavioral skills. The senior vice president of engineering from ParkWiz will be coming to talk about what he looks for in junior, so it should be, I mean, you're going to hear it directly from the horse's mouth of what he looks for. Just want to point out that you don't really have a ton of time to do your final projects. So if you have time to just kind of flesh out a few ideas today, the better. The more you flesh it out now, the better off you'll be a little bit later. We'll start on Friday. You'll have this first weekend will be a pretty monumental weekend just to get the skeleton underway. So you have probably you have like 48 hours roughly to like pull it together, like more or less the skeleton. You'll have this whole week to work, and then this next weekend is like pretty much polishing and things of that nature. And then Monday, I think Monday afternoon, we'll be back over here, if I'm not mistaken. You lose Wednesday because of mock interview day, and because you've not done 4-hour interviews before, it will be fairly challenging. I'm not sure if this is going to happen, but I'm going to have a code freeze at 12 p.m., or I'll just say end of day on, actually no, 12 noon on the 10th, I'm going to set a code freeze, meaning you can't put any new features at all. Just fix up all the bugs which you inevitably will have on that particular day. Like no more code as of 12. Let me add that in here before I forget. And then yeah, we have demo day and graduation. Did you all receive invites for that yet, or no? You can invite as many people as you want. So if you want to invite family and friends and things like that, it'll be from, I think, 2 to 3:30 or so. And the way that generally works is people arrive, and you'll have kind of like a science fair kind of. You remember like high school science fair? The people just kind of like walk down like the aisles full of like the poster boards. It's going to be the 4 of you at a desk, and then you're going to say like, you know, this is my app, try it out. This is why we thought of it, just to kind of get some nerves out to talk with the audience first. Then we'll have a presentation, like a formalized presentation. So you'll each have to speak. You'll each have to have like a script to go through, cover everything that you may need. And then we'll have the graduation, and then we will drink beer and eat chips. And it's since Google is so close to like the West Loop, and there's a lot of great restaurants over there. If you want to go and, you know, drink yourself silly afterwards, that's totally fine. Let's see, is this finished yet? It's still going. I think it's almost done. Oh, okay. It looks like we're finished. All right, so the main objectives for New Site number 6, one of them is to wire up the login page. So yesterday when you were doing New Site 5, we just created a login page with the username and the password. Today when we actually submit the form, we're going to post it to an API and make sure that we get a token that comes back. Number 2, we're going to have the nav bar. It's going to be, you remember when you were like doing stuff in Rails and it says like if current user, so like if the person is logged in, I'm going to show one certain view. If they're not logged in, I'm going to show another type of view. We're going to do the same thing inside of React. And with that, I'm only going to be able to add an article if you're logged in. So let's run npm run update app. There's a few things I put in there for you. And I'm just going to run npm start. Make sure we've got everything set up so we're all squared away. So inside of this news site that we've built over the past couple weeks, this is what's called a single page app. Everything is more or less here on this single page. I'm not really going back and forth, not making requests to a server and things like that. It's very quick. I could just just hit different links and it'll automatically just kind of work. Right now I can still take up like Fallujah, and then it'll lower the amount of articles that I have. We have an add an article, which we did yesterday. And we also have a login page, which is, I believe Raymond set it up, but there's no, let me actually open this in incognito. I had an issue with this yesterday. An email and password, as of right now, I don't really do anything. So if I just do hello@email.com and password is 123, and I submit it, it'll console log my email and my password. So we're in a decent spot. We're going to start wiring everything up. So when we were first writing the code, we were doing things with right. When we were first writing code and we wanted to do anything with an API, we only have one API as of right now. And that's the articles API. And this is, remember, we were doing things like fetch article by ID, or the section, or the fetch all the articles, search all the articles, add all the articles. When we want to talk with the API regarding something else, we want to create another file. So when I ran npm run update app, which is located right over here, there were a few things that were kind of built into this API layer inside of the temp folder that I grabbed out of there and then threw in at this particular point. So all I did, it's nothing fancy when I did npm run update app. I just copied a few files from where they were into this particular API. So I have the users API because I want to have two different files for two different things. This API revolves around the articles. This particular API revolves around all of the users. Now, when let's see. So we have one particular method here. It's called login. It takes in a credentials object, and then I'm going to export it so I can use it in different areas. It's going to look very similar to this constant add article because I'm trying to post something. I got the person's credentials, the username and the password. I mean the email and the password, and I want to post it over to the API. So just to kind of get us started, I'm going to grab all of this code and just shove it over here. I'm going to change, obviously, the endpoint that I have. Probably going to have to add in some things into the headers, and we'll go in from there. So according to the README, it needs to accept a more or less a credentials object that looks a little something like this. Password for today for the API is Open Sesame, but I need to pass it in as with the two key value pairs. The first one is going to be email. The next one's going to be password, and the email, and then I'm going to have password as well. So again, this is the password that we're going to be using for today. It's going to be Open Sesame. In addition, we are going to be making a request not to this particular URL, but this particular URL. When I say URL and endpoint, those are two identical things, just so you know. So URL, it's like the endpoint is like where is the final point that I'm making the request to. So endpoint URL, like it's the same thing when you're talking about API calls. So if you hear someone saying, what endpoint are you using for that? They're talking about the URL. So it looks like I'm going to be making a fetch request to this particular URL, and inside the headers, generally speaking, you also throw like what type of content you're sending over. You make sure you have the method, and then you make sure you have the body over here. I don't think there's anything else to change for this one. Let's just try it out and see what happens.
Does line 7 article object and credential object have to be the same?
Ah, good call. Again, you all are catching things that I was not catching earlier. That's how you know you're learning new things. All right, so we're passing in something called credentials objects, and before because I copied and pasted, I just had it listed as articles object. Did we unlock that door? All right, so first things first, all we did was we created a new API, everything related to users, and we are making requests to this particular URL with a credentials object. Like all we did was we just created a separate file because we're talking to the API regarding users. Next thing, once we created the API, we want to use it on a specific page. So I'm going to start with app.js. This is my main entry point. And over here, you can kind of see that I have a login page. So inside of login page, I'm probably going to need to call this particular this user's API. API. So right now, the login page doesn't really do anything except for have a form on the page and console log the values. And that's kind of what we saw over here. This is the login page. It's here because app.js has everything under routes. So it's registered with the main app.js. Whenever I make a request to the path /login, and renders this login page. And then all I'm doing is I can type anything into email and password, I submit it, and it's going to console log it out to the page. Instead of console logging it out to the page, I want this to reach out to the user's API. So right here, that's where all those console logs are happening. Instead, I want to import the user's API and then make a request to it. That being said, if I were to make a request to the user's API and then and successfully log in, I need to store that state of being logged in, not at this particular level, but actually at the app.js level. And the reason I need to have it at the app.js level is because it alters pretty much everything that's happening underneath it. As of right now, if I just update login pages state, it doesn't really do anything for me. I really need to update app.js. So first things first, I'm going to create a class method in app.js that accepts the user as a parameter, sets it into the state, and then from there, I'm going to pass that into login page. Again, this is the main central hub, and these are all different children of the central hub. So I can pass everything from app.js into these lower level pages. So first things first, I'm going to create a method called handle login. It's going to take in a user. I'm just going to do this set state user is equal to the user that I pass in. Now, this next section really confused me for a little while, but I hope to explain it so that you can understand. When you have components on your page, like AppNav or pretty much just AppNav on this particular page, you're able to pass in props directly into the component. But when you have a page that's part of a route, you can't just pass in everything directly into this article page. Like I can't, or this login page, I can't just set in user equals this.state.user. I am unable to do this. So the way that you pass in components, the way that you pass in props into pages looks a little something like this. So outside of the render, I'm going to create a const. So again, when I declare a route, I have to declare a component. I can't simply just pass in history and handle login directly into this component right over here. I actually have to create an entire variable outside of this, outside of the route, and then from there, I can pass in. I can't pass in the component like this. I have to say you're going to render out the render login page. Again, so I have this to start over. We created a user's API that's going to talk to this particular endpoint. I'm going to call that API from somewhere inside login page, but login page cannot hold this state, because it's login. If the login page holds the state, the app.js doesn't know about it. App.js is the topmost level, and the topmost level is going to pass the state down from one level to another. So with that, I have a handle login that takes in a particular user. So I'm going to be passing this particular method from this level into login page, which we do right over here. And remember we bind this because since it's being used inside of login page, this is in the context of login page. But because we bind this to it, this refers to app.js rather than the login page. Now, when everything's surrounded by a route, you can't just pass in like a bunch of things like history and handle login directly into this particular component here. I need to change the component to a render and then create a constant called render, and that will return this login page with these two props thrown directly in. Let's take a look to see if this works. So if all goes well, I can still do everything here. Let's refresh the page. If I could just go to /login, everything still works at this particular point. How can I verify that render login page or this particular login page has the history and has the handle login? So again, I'm passing stuff from app.js into this login page component.
You can console log this stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. So outside of the render, I'm just going to do console log the stuff props to make sure that I have the history and the handle login being passed in from app.js into the login page. Hopefully all goes well. I will open this up. You can kind of see that there's an object. So this .props is an object, that's correct. Does it have history and does it have whatever that other thing was? So it looks like I have history and I have handle login, which is just a function. So we have successfully passed everything from app.js with this history and this handle login into this login page over here. I'm going to pause for a second and let you catch up. Okay. All right, so we have this form. On this form right here, there's an onSubmit event handler. So the event handler will basically, this only fires off when you hit this submit button right over here, which will fire off this .handle form submit, which is located up here, .bind this. At this particular point, I'm going to, one, make an API call. So I'm going to do, well, let's see. When we look at our user's API, we need to create a credentials object for them with an email and a password key. So that seems pretty simple. We'll just call this let credentials object equal, and then I have an object. Email is going to be this first thing because that's the first one in the first thing on the form. And then the password is going to be the second value. At this particular point, I'm going to call out to the user's API. So I'll do users API dot login with the credentials object. Once I log in, what am I returned? Let me split the screen real quick. So when I log in, what is the thing that's returned when I make this request to the API? A response object. Okay. So we'll call this .then. It'll take in a response of some sort. What will the response do?
verify whether or not the person is a user.
Pretty much, yeah, that's true. But what am I going to do with this particular response? So again, I log in, like the person fills out this form, they hit submit, the on submit is fired off, so it handles the form submit, which is located over here. I prevent the default from happening because it's a form. I don't want it to take it to another page. I create the like a payload, more or less. I hit this credential, this users API.login, and hopefully it logs me in. At this particular point, I need to handle this login from up over here. So if I make a request, a post request to this particular endpoint, it's going to return me something. Like maybe we'll just console log response. Let's just do that for now. We won't do any more.
You need to import the users API.
That's a good call. Just waiting for someone to catch that for me. Users API from. So let's see where we are right now. Looks like we're here inside of pages, and we need to get into this folder over here. So we need to go out one level, go to the API folder, and go to users API.js. See if this works. So again, I'm going to go over here, fill this out, and just see what the response that comes back from the server is. All right, so I will do not an email and not a whatever. Submit the thing, and I get a 401 unauthorized. This is not the right person, and this is the giant response that I get back. So if I try this again, I refresh the page, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do the actual email and password, which is john@do.com, and the password is open sesame. It's at the top of your curriculum. When I hit submit now, I actually get a response, and you can kind of see that it's not the 401 that I saw before, but the status is actually 200, which means it's good to go. So using this particular response, I need to pass the entire user that's passed back to me back up to app.js. And because we have this thing called handle login, I can also render that over here. So I'm going to just run this.props.handle login with the response that I get back. I could probably change this to user because that's a more descriptive thing. So when I make the request to the user's API, what's returned to me is, well, it's gone now. It was an entire user object. I need to pass it from the login page into app.js. Because I've passed in something called handle login, which is a function from app.js into login page, I can call it using this .props because it was a property that was passed down, handle login with this particular user. After I log in, I want to go back to the home page. I also passed in this thing called history, which belongs to app.js. So I'm just do this.props.history because there was a property called history. I'm going to push in the slash to send them back. So if all goes well, I can do john@do.com, open sesame. And then once I log in, I'm sent right back to the original page, the home page that we've got right over here. That was a lot. Are there any questions?
Yeah, handle login.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a protected method, or is that?
Nope. It's just a custom method that I wrote inside of app.js. I can name this method whatever I'd like. Hmm. So the question again was, this handle login, is that a protected method? No, it was just a method that I wrote by myself. It just says handle login is going to take in a user. I'm going to set the state of app.js to have a user based off of what the login page returns me. All right, let's try adding an article real quick. So we're able to handle logging in and logging in for right now, and I want to create an article. So I'm just going to do whatever, and whatever. When I hit submit, the API has been updated. It says it's been unsuccessfully submitted, and you can kind of see the API has been updated where there's a response that says it's unauthorized. There's a 401. What we've actually done is we said we don't want any random person simply coming in and any random person coming in and just adding a random article. We want to make sure that they're logged in before they can actually render an article. So we need to add one extra thing. Take a look at the article API, and we take a look at this add article function that we've got here at the bottom. Right now, it only takes an article object, but in order to make sure that you are, logged in and you are authorized to add an article to our website, we're going to pass in an extra little function. So it's going to take in an article object, which is also going to take a extra token. So whenever I call add article, I need to pass in both the article and the token to make sure that you're actually logged in. It's located, the thing that's going, when we make the request to this particular endpoint, there's headers that basically tell what type of content's being sent over, but there's also something called authorization that will take in a particular token, just to make sure that so I'm sending it in the headers, the authorization, which is the value is going to be this token right over here. Let's see if this works now. So I'm going to submit it here. I'm still getting this unsuccessfully submitted, but I'm passing in a token. Like what's missing here?
Yeah, passing the token.
I'm not actually passing the token in. So which page are we talking about? So we'll start at app.js. So we're going to start from the top, and we're going to kind of chase this down. Where do I go next? So this is the main entry point, and I'm looking for the things that allows me to add an article.
Add article page.
Yeah, so there's a component here called add article page. Add article page looks like it, oh, there it is. Article API.add article. I'm only passing in the article object. I need to pass in the token that we created over here. So when a user is returned from the user's API, a token is also returned with them. So it looks like I'll probably need to, because it looks like I'm not passing any sort of props down from app.js into add article page. I know later I'm going to need to have some sort of token that comes in over here. So it'll probably be passed in as props.
So wouldn't you do the same thing as a render login page?
That's perfectly right. So I'm going to grab this here. Instead of render the login page, I'll create this to be render add article page. And inside of here, the component's going to be add article page, and I'm going to need some sort of token. Maybe I'll call this token equals, actually, how does that look again? I'll call this token or something like that. The token, what's the value of the token here? And I'll change this down here while you are figuring that out. Not props.history, I'll tell you that.
User. So the user object comes with a token automatically, right?
The user comes back with something called ID. That is going to be the token. Maybe we'll just pass in the whole user for now. We'll just pass this in as user. We'll just do this.state.user. So inside of the render add article page, I'm passing down a prop called user, which is equal to the user that's set over here. So I'm going to start with add article page. And then maybe I'll do, inside the add article page, I'll just do console log. this.props.user just to see what we get. I think I have a whole bunch of console logs elsewhere, so I want to get rid of them. So I only want one at a time. This is terrible. That's not what I wanted. I'll get rid of this login page because I think we're done with that. Users API doesn't have anything. Articles API doesn't have anything. I think we're good. So if I refresh this page, you can kind of see that add article page JS line 35. This.props.user. Unfortunately, there's no user passed in quite yet. That's because I'm not really logged in. So let me first log in. I'll do john@doe.com and open Sesame. And then I'm going to add an article. At this particular point, because I've logged in and I've authenticated app.js has this particular user, you can kind of see that I have a user inside of here. But this is not really a user. This looks like a response from the server. So how do I get just the body of the response? So again, let's just jump back to login page.
What does user look like? What is it?
As of right now, user looks like this, which is just a response object. But I don't want the response object. I want the body that comes in as a result. So I'm missing one small little line.
You gotta do another dot then for it to JSON.
Yep. So how do I do that?
Well, at the end of that arrow function, just do user.json. Do another dot then JSON. That would be that block code.
Yep. So when the response comes back, let's do response.json, and then I'll change this to user. When the response comes back from the API on the user's API over here, I get an entire response object. To get to the body of this response object, I just call .json on it. And then from there, after that, that's basically the user, and I can pass that in. So let's see what we've got. I'm going to refresh this page. And you can kind of see, okay, I no longer have a user because I've refreshed the page. So I'm going to go back to login one more time. John@doe.com, open Sesame. Add an article. And you can kind of see this is the body that was actually returned within that response object. So it looks like I have this strange looking token, which is this ID that we're talking about here. Now that I've got everything and I'm inside my add article page, remember I'm making a request out to the API. I have an article object, but I need to pass in a token as well. So I'm just going to do this.props.user.id, this ID number that we've got right over here. If all goes well, okay, it looks like I'm missing my user once more, so I'll log in again. I'll Doe. Add an article. Anything. Byline here. Abstract 123. Submit. And it says successfully submitted. Before it wasn't successfully submitted because I wasn't authorized. It didn't say that I had it didn't actually recognize me because I didn't have a token. If all goes well, it redirects me to the home page here. And you can kind of see here's that article that I wrote. So I can't actually submit an article unless I'm fully logged in at this particular point. We're nearly finished. So we created the login functionality. We created the ability to only be able to add an article if you're logged in. But I mean, if I'm logged out, so if I go over here and I just kind of click around and add an article, you can kind of see like a bunch of stuff is kind of broken here, but like I probably don't want this add an article thing to even show up unless I'm logged in. So with that, I'm going to jump back to this thing up here. Why would I want this if it's not, why would I want this add article if I'm not logged in? So how do I change this particular line in order to account for the fact, like, if I'm logged in, show it. If I'm not logged in, don't show it.
Make that a variable, maybe? Or an object or something?
Well, I mean, this still needs to be here, but like, yeah, this still needs to be here. It's a trick question. I'm actually not in the right file.
A condition in the nav file.
Yep. So if you look at app.js, right, this is just a bunch of routes. I still need this no matter what, because this is where I declare all of my routes. But the thing that's rendering this up here is actually the nav bar. So if you jump into app.nav, app.nav has a whole bunch of stuff. It looks like I have a bunch of links. I have a bunch of nav items. I have a link to add article. How do how do I conditionally render this so that it only shows up when I am logged in?
You can take that out, make that some type of variable.
It could. I could also just do it in one line. But I need to actually pass in one thing from app.js into appnav.js. Probably I'm going to be passing in a user. So do user equals this.state.user. So when somebody logs in and they're logged in successfully, a user is created in the state of app.js. I'm going to pass that down into appnav, so I have access to it within props. I think I can actually do this really quickly. I think it's just this.props.user, if that person exists, and then I'll link to them if it's here. So if I go back and I refresh the page, you can see that add an article goes away because I've refreshed the page, I've cleared out my cache, and I no longer am logged in. But if I log in, at doe.com, I do open sesame, I log in, this page is now over here. So it says, is there a user that's being passed from app.js? If so, then I'm going to render out this add an article. Probably need a logging in and log out functionality as well. So let's jump back over here. Inside of this app now, I'm going to have two links for logging in and logging out. Okay. Logging in and logging out. Looks like I probably have to put list elements around them so that it appears nice and neat. Let's take a look. I refresh the page, and I have login and log out. That's probably not what I want. This is definitely not what I want. I don't want logging in and logging out. So when I'm logged out, I probably want to log in, like link to show up on the screen. And if I'm logged in, I want this to show up on the screen and this also to show up on the screen, but not the login page. There's a bunch of conditional logic that goes on here. How should I write this? There's two cases. Let me just write them out down over here for now. One, if you are logged in, show the log out, do not show login, and show add article.
I'm not sure if you're able to do this with line 15. Inside of the curly brackets, you just put that. You expand those curly brackets out and put the conditional within that.
That's a great point. Let's try it. I don't know. So you're saying if I'm logged in, so if the user exists, have an add an article and the logout page. No, I actually don't know. I didn't actually think about that. That's pretty good. Refresh the page. Have a login. We'll go to John at doe.com. Not sure I don't think it's working. Let's get rid of this altogether for now. Fresh. Okay. So I don't have this link here, so I'm going to go to /login, john@doe.com, open Sesame, and I just have logout. So unfortunately, that's not it. Oh, I understand why. So this is evaluating to true. This is evaluating to true. The last thing that evaluates is what comes out on the page. So you can only do two things. So unfortunately, we cannot do that. If I'm logged in, show the logout page. Do not show the login, and show the article. If you're logged out, show the login page only. I think those are the two cases that we're talking about here. Actually, a lot simpler than you think. If there is no user, click login. If the user, there's a logout. That's pretty much it. Let's try it again. So we refresh the page. I am not logged in. So there is a login thing. There's no add article, and there's no logout. Once I log in, I have an add an article and a logout, and the what am I trying to say? And the login page is not over here. So all I did was just do the same thing with a bang in the front. If there's no user, then and if there's no user and this is evaluates to true, then just return this thing out to the page.
What happened if you took line 14 and just put those two conditions in between on the other side of the ampersand, put those in parentheses and just like expanded out the jack so that.
So unfortunately, the curly braces actually only take two things. So I can't add like 4 or 5 conditionals because the last thing that shows up on the page.
It's not going to be in the conditional.
Okay.
The link to the log. So
you want to grab this?
Yeah, I can try it out.
And throw it here. Is that what you're saying?
No, like take the ampersand out and just basically go to the end of 14 and expand out the jack so that it's on 14 and then just put everything.
I see what you're going for. So just grab this. So if I'm logged in, add an article and log. So I actually need to take this portion and throw it at the end. That could work. I'm not certain. Why is?
I think you might have to put them in parentheses, all right?
Maybe. We'll find out. We'll find out. We got time. Refresh here. Nope, it's not happy with me. So we might need to do those parentheses, like you said.
This got props too.
You mean this whole thing?
Yeah, just line 14, basically, parentheses.
Like that, or surrounding the whole thing?
Surrounding the this hot props and ampersand.
Yep. So I think I've done what that said. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like you can do that.
I'll figure it out, but I'll try.
I think we're good over here. So we're conditionally rendering things on the top of the page, and then finally we need to create a few more things. So right now we log in. We go john@doe.com. We do open Sesame, which is fine. When I click logout, it doesn't really do anything at this particular point because there's no route to handle logout. So under app.js, I'm going to create another page, which is going to be logout. And I don't think I need to render anything because I'm not going to show anything. I'm just going to I'm going to create another const that's going to, like I'm not rendering a component, I'm going to execute some bit of code. I'm going to do render logout, and then I'll just do this.set state user is equal to nothing, and then I'm just going to return myself out to a redirect. because I'm executing some code and not simply just rendering a page out, I need to have render instead of component. So whenever anybody makes a request to /logout, it's going to render the logout method here on line 50. First thing I'm going to do is kill the user that's inside of state, and then redirect them to /login. Let's try this. Oh, breaks. It says redirect is not defined. Because it's a capital R, I know that's coming from some sort of library. So I need to import it. It's actually coming from React Router DOM. There's something built in called redirect that it gives to us for free. Let's see if this works. Refresh the page. All right, we should log in first. John@doe.com. Open Sesame. I'm logged in now. You can kind of see the state has changed the look of the nav bar up here. And when I click on this logout, it's going to log me out, kill the person, and send me back to /login. And you can kind of see that's what we've got over here. So that's news site number 6. It covers way more, I feel like, in like news site number 6 than all of 1 through 5 almost combined. I mean, we first started off with the users API. We created a new fetch request over here. From there, we learned about components. If you're just rendering out just like pure text out to the screen, and you don't need to pass anything down, you can just do component and this will render out the article page. If you need to pass in props or do some sort of code, you can't do it within component. You have to have something called render, which will just be this, like, more or less this variable method up here above the return. What else did we do? We learned about this add article page requiring some sort of token. We created a payload inside of login page for credentials object. Once we got that back, we got the user from this particular page, passed it up using the handle login back into app.js, which went into appNav, which basically said, like, if I have a user and I'm passing it down right over here, if I have a user and they're fully logged in, I'm going to show different things on the page. So there's quite a bit to kind of take apart at this one. This one is a fairly difficult challenge. I'm going to stop recording here and open it up for any questions.